Good morning, everyone. Welcome to IIJNM Storyboarding Journalism Webinar Series 2021. I'm Nandini, the Senior Academic Assistant at IIJNM. Today's webinar is on gender in media, conducted by Punita Maheshwari. Hi, Punita.
Hello.
An alumnus of the 2015 batch of IIJNM, Punita has covered education, human interest, entertainment, and gender beats with the New Indian Express and Bangalore Mirror, reporting on stories, working at the desk, and producing weekly editions. She moved to digital advocacy and gender campaigning with Jatka.org, where she has been working on petitions countering harassment, building safer educational spaces, and gender sensitization. She's currently exploring the importance of storytelling and social media as a tool for advocacy. In this session, she will share her learnings on the responsibilities of a journalist while speaking to sources, channelizing emotional and overwhelming thoughts into advocacy, and some interesting anecdotes on feminism. Before I hand over the session to Punita, here is the format of today's session. The webinar will be a total of 60 minutes. The speaker will take the questions in the last 20 minutes of the session, or maybe when Punita opens up the session for questions, she'll let you know on that. And please raise your hands via the option on Zoom, and you may ask your questions by unmuting your mic. You may also input your questions in the chat box in case your mic is not functioning. This is all about today's format, and I will leave it on Punita now. Over to you, Punita.
Thank you so much. And hello, all. I hope you all are well and safe. And before I even start the session, I would like to release a trigger warning. There will be mentions of, talking about stories on sexual harassment. There will be there will be a lot of talking about sexual harassment redressal, and we will be talking about how we can, as journalists, do a better job while reporting the gender stories. Before I begin, I also wanted to share an incident that just happened. So the thing is that I'm going to share a story with you, a story that I did 6 years ago, which was very much instrumental in, building my interest in gender reporting, and uh, that gave me a lot of perspective around, how a gender story should be reported. Um, Whenever you get a chance to read the story, you can, but I would just like you. It was about a woman, and it was about a trans person who had faced molestation in an educational institute, and how they wanted to, uh, how they use their education, their own, the resources at hand, to come out of that and actually become activists, advocating for gender rights and trans person rights. So this story was about the whole journey of a victory, of healing, of, how harassment cannot, in a lot of cases, not stop one's life. So it was a story of triumph. um, why I really wanted to share this story was, cut to 6 years later. I was just reading the story again before this workshop, and I realized that this story could have been written uh, in so much, in a more gender sensitive format, and in a format that just doesn't talk about grammar or a paragraph formation or just the page layout, but also, has a hint of a lot of gender sensitivity. And while I was looking at the story, I I remembered that, and trust me when I say, the story went on for editing for 2 weeks. The whole team was involved in the story, because I think everyone felt that it is a very good story that, an organization, a news organization, would want to invest in. Uh, with so much of scrutiny on the story, so much of rewriting of the story, it just made me wonder that, why the gender terms were not given so much more importance as they were given about, getting more sources into the story, getting more information about the story, more paragraph formation about the story. So that really made me realize, I think, two or three things that we have come a long way. What we didn't know 6 years ago, 5 years ago in journalism, we know now. There's a lot of talk about what kind of terms are needed to be used when you are covering a story related to women and trans persons, and these are very basic things. The issue that that story, one of the issues that that story had was at 12 places instead of survivors. The mention was for the victims, that the victims went through this, and it was only 5 years later that I just stumbled upon that story again, and I realized that we are not supposed to call the sexual harassment survivors victims. They are survivors because they have survived an incident that can that was that could have been one of the biggest obstacles in their lives. Uh, so the word survivor gives a more empowering and a hopeful feeling that uh, you know the life doesn't stop there, and there are means in the system as well to pull you out of that kind of a situation. And I think while we report facts, there is also a responsibility on the journalist to create that kind of environment in their story, that there is hope. There is some, especially when it is a story of harassment, because the system, because the society, the kind of society that we live in is I mean, this is no news that the society that we live in is not very um, generous to any of the survivors. So as a journalist whose story that will be read by thousands of people, it is very important to use the right terms and the intentions behind it to make it a more empowering story by the time it comes out. Now the words have been changed. Uh, so I do not work at the New Indian Express anymore. The story was for the New Indian Express. But 3 days ago, I just had to pull in some contacts, and I just had to ask the online desk there to change the words from victim to survivors. I just couldn't stand that, it was still uh, uh, victims. The word victim was still used in the story. So I think the lessons derived from this, why I wanted to share this incident, was two lessons. Um, if you want to rectify a mistake where in any kind of any kind of story, there is a possibility, but that will only come when you are open to the process of learning and unlearning, and when you want to uh, read more about what you are reporting on. So when we say research about a story, it is also about just wanting to do that story better than just facts, getting a little bit into the deep end. And I think I know you are freshers, and you will just be learning the logistics around it, but 2 or 3 years down the line, uh, in journalism, I think you would just want to feel what better can we do in terms of our writing style and everything, and that is where these kind of spaces can fit in. That is where you want to you would want to research better for your organization, you would want to research better for your story, read more about it, uh, talk to more experts and advocates about it. And I think that is where the personal growth comes in. So I'm just trying to introduce that concept to you, and whenever you get a chance, do hop on, because you all will have your own individual journalistic journeys, and I hope they will be amazing. The second lesson that was derived out of the situation was that um, I the story, again, it went through 2 weeks of editing, which is not the case in a lot of stories that happen. They are very quick. uh, there was checks on grammar, paragraph formation. Why nobody spoke about the gender beats? So the lesson out of it is that there is a lack in the system as well, and you are the guys who will be going into journalism after a year or something. And so these are the kind of gaps that you might want to know about before getting into the field. and so that you can recognize them and put in your own knowledge and wisdom while covering that story. So these were the two things that came out of this situation. And please do read the story whenever you get time, not for just reading about it, just to uh, maybe how you think that this story could have been written, even in a more gender sensitive way. So that is something we can take up again towards the end of the workshop as well. This workshop will also talk about the basics of how to report, how to speak to the source, especially when it is a woman in front of you, in terms of in various roles, as an entrepreneur, as a good Samaritan, as a survivor, or as a celebrity. There is a certain way in which we can speak to we can report better while speaking to women, because they, let's face it, they are half the population, and there needs to be a little more constructive way that we can speak to the women as journalists. Before I take you through those logistical basics around it, I have a question for you guys. In a scenario where you have to you have to go and meet a source, which is a big shot government official who's supposed to give you a lot of data information, and the appointments and everything have been very official and a little bit intimidating. And in the scenario two, you just have to go ahead and interview a woman who has just started her business. I wanted to ask, and I wanted you guys to ask yourselves as well, that who would you be more intimidated and more nervous, or imagine this is your first story. Who would you be, more looking forward to, and you would maybe dress up better, or wake up half an hour early, or whatever you do for your first story, that excitement and that nervousness. So who would you do it for more? um, you can just put your answers in the chat, or you can speak up. I would really like to have it as an interactive session as well. The politician. Pallavi says that it would be the politician. Is it the same for a lot of you, or politician? Mr. Datta says politician in uh, the large font. Okay, got your point. Thank you. Um, okay, I think maybe that would be the natural choice. What I would want to also, as a journalist, one learning is that you would not want to be intimidated by your source. There is an aspect where uh, you just want to be confident while you're speaking to the source. Personally, I will prepare more for the woman because she'll be inspiring. Ananya says that she will prepare more for the woman entrepreneur. Amazing. Shubha Shri Mohapatra says that the woman with the startup business, as it will motivate me to put forward new perspective in my research. Okay, amazing. Yeah, so there we have, I think, what I wanted to say out of this question was, I think we already have that perspective in the card itself. While we also feel that it would be the politician, the reason that we still need to feel that kind of nervous and that kind of looking forward kind of attitude for a woman as well is um, that really affects our questions. While we will be asking about when you're looking forward to a woman as just a woman who has just started her business, you would want to talk about how what were the challenges that she faced, and what was the the difficult part of the journey. But if you are already placing the woman at a place who has, arrived, and someone you would be intimidated by, uh, you will change the questions around, where's she taking it? How does she want to, go about the logistics of it? How does she want to build it even more? How does she want to, you know, uh, take it up internationally? And the kind of questions that are more related to the growth of the business rather than her struggles, which are equally important. Of course, the people need to know that how much struggle it takes to build a business. However, you wouldn't ask. However, we also need to inject the ambitious and the positive side of it, which will come when we already look up to the woman as someone who is just going to nail it with her business. And I think that is the idea when you prep more, and you are just more invested in that story. So Bea says that I can be more candid with the woman entrepreneur, woman to woman. Okay. Yeah, that is also there. I mean, I think we will definitely come to the aspect of the importance of women journalists covering gender related stories. We'll come to that. Thank you for bringing that up. um, thank you so much for your answers, and the next 10 to 15 minutes will be about just sharing a lot of basics from personal learnings that I had as a journalist, and also taking some excerpts from various papers around reporting about gender stories. We will start with covering gender media if as a good Samaritan and as a feature story. Um, okay. So the first thing is something to ask about is the pronouns. And uh, I know till very recently I haven't done that, because this was a concept that was introduced to me as a gender advocate rather than as a journalist. Again, I would like to ask that why is it very important to ask for the pronouns of the person you are speaking with? Any guesses, wild guesses, anything, like anything that comes in the mind. So the pronouns are basically she, her, they, them, and the pronouns are not very specific to the uh, sex assigned during birth. I can be a woman and I can use a pronoun of they and them. Okay, Pia says that it is basically how the person sees themselves. Exactly. um, my question is that why is it important as a journalist uh, to ask for the pronouns with your other questions? Just a gesture to ask before assuming who they are. Yeah, yeah. Any other guesses? Or, I mean, of course, anything, something that you already know. To be specific with the preference of the subject. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right, Pallavi and Shubhashri. It's very important. It is a kind of a gesture as well. However, more than just a gesture, it is about, again, taking up a responsibility, because you using the pronouns in the story will create a ripple effect where a lot of people who will just read those pronouns will wonder that, why do we need to know about them? And the basic reason is that you were assigned something and then you pass it as that gender. Basically, to create, we would need to be open to various pronouns while reporting on gender, is to create an allyship to those who do not want to be associated with a certain gender, and ensure that it is very normalized. When does anything become normalized? It becomes normalized when people start using it. And what is a better way to start it with a story? Because that will reach a lot of people. And when it is normalized, it is not as stood out, and the taboo around it is reduced. So that is one small thing that you can do, which will have a lot of benefit in the gender field. And that can be normalized in a newsroom as well. This is a very, very small change that can bring a lot of change in a newsroom. So that is something to just, introduce whenever you are in a newsroom, or even when you're reporting a story for IIJNM. Maybe it's just a concept that you would want to, just look into. It's interesting. You can read more about it, and trust me, you will just be amazed that, how long ago this has been introduced, and we are just, being open to practicing it now. So that is something to look forward to. And yeah, so that was a very basic question, and this is not very specific to Good Samaritans as well. Pronouns are something that you can ask anybody you report to when you're covering a gender story. Coming back to how to report on a Good Samaritan would be, asking about how the idea was initiated. There's always a story behind an idea, and rather than talking about the challenges that they faced, um, talking about uh, how the idea came to them, what was it that really, really, put them, you know, push them to get where they are. Uh, Again, it's also maybe a good idea to talk a little bit less about how the family was supported, uh, you know how the family supported them, or the husband was very supportive, or the children were very supportive, or the brother was very supportive. The idea is to not glorify the support, while we can always use it as an example. And this can also be very story, subjective as well in a lot of stories. But there can be an idea where we wouldn't want to glorify that, the presence of someone very a strong male figure in a woman Samaritan's life, because it's about her as well. It's about how she has taken up the project. So maybe talking more about them. And the other thing is that family support is something that we want to create a scenario where it's just basic. It's something very basic, and we wouldn't want to thank them more than we need to for that. So that is something that can be brought into the story writing format. The third thing that is again about the narratives. How did they approach and talk about the challenges? When they're talking about the challenges, be very, maybe it can be a very good idea to be a listener at that time rather than posing a lot of questions, because I think the onus of how much a person wants to share about their challenges can be on the source. Maybe we wouldn't want to ask as much as they would want to share. If they want to share, of course, I mean, that is something that that can be left a little open. So these were the 3 or 4 observations around talking about entrepreneur or Good Samaritan, or a woman who's doing something in the industry. Okay, talking to celebrities. Talking to celebrities is, of course, something. There's been a lot of talk anyway going about it. However, one question that can really, really be set aside, is that can be a no, is just never ask them that when they are going to have children. really. I mean, it is very important to create an atmosphere, because why I wanted to speak to you about is that when I was briefly covering entertainment, in the brief stints that I covered entertainment, there were a lot of differences in a way. A woman was asked a question, a woman celebrity was asked a question, and a male celebrity. And I think celebrities like Priyanka Chopra have already spoken about it, Sania Mirza have already spoken about it, that they have called out journalists on the panel itself, that these are not the questions you would ask if there was a male celebrity right here, asking about family, their relationships. They are putting in equal work for the fame and you know the kind of uh, environment they are living in. And it is very important to talk about their work, maybe talk about their fitness regime, maybe talk about you know talk about how they want to take forward uh, their career. Basically, a lot of career oriented questions for celebrities are important, and I'm sure you guys already are aware of this, but you will have the chance to maybe in your career to just go ahead and speak to a celebrity. And I wish I knew better when in one day itself I interviewed, I think, Madhavan and the female lead in one of his movies. So I could also see the pattern very subconsciously in my head, that my questions had changed a lot when I was speaking to both of them. And thankfully, there was a lot of thankfully the editing and everything that took care of it, and it did not come out as graphic in my head as I would regret later. So I was saved, thankfully. So that's why it's really, really important for me to share this learning, that you really want to be very, very open and very, very responsible while talking to women celebrities. uh, Talk about their work. There is as much masala from there as well, but at least it will be some healthy masala. So I know entertainment is all about masala, and it needs to be spoken about in that way. But just talking about the ethics and the morals rather than in their families, it's just the basic thing to do, and it's actually little. It's high time. It's really high time. The most important aspect that I wanted to talk to you about was talking to survivors. Um, I'm sorry, I think I missed this thing. It's important because my story will reach many, and the person will want to present the gender identity correctly. Yeah, Ananya, definitely. This is actually one of the major reasons that we need to use the pronouns, because people identify with those pronouns, and it is very important for us to not get that normalized, that it is okay for people to choose their pronouns. And journalism can do a lot in this format. Talking to survivors, yeah, this is something that is something really important. The next 5-6 minutes would be a little overwhelming, and I would like you guys to concentrate a little bit more on this if you haven't been so far. Uh, but Yeah, it is very important that you try to build an open relationship. Of course, boundaries are important for your own sake, because these stories can be very triggering for your own self as well. It is very important to take care of yourselves as well when you're reporting any kind of gender stories. Not just for yourself, but when you are taking good care of yourselves and doing the proper research, and taking some time, and um, being okay with your overwhelming self, and trying to find ways to channelize it into the story, you will be able to ask much better questions and write in a much better way, not just the facts, but the underlying statements around it. So that is something that you can obviously take up, and I can share one or two examples of how something that really, really was triggering, and while it was overwhelming, I think the certain ways to do, to report it well was um, without just channelizing that overwhelming feeling into writing. Maybe just take the first stab at just, pouring whatever you want to write about. And then when you are a little bit calmed down and, maybe you can drink a glass of water, then try to edit it more, because before you send it for editing as well. So these are some certain steps and, certain good practices a journalist can follow while they are dealing with triggering issues. That has a lot of value. And it is equally, coming back to the survivor, it is very important to build an open relationship with the survivors. It is a bit of a responsibility on the journalist also, that the survivor feels comfortable sharing their story. And I think one of the first lessons that heard and learned at IIJNM was that nobody is obliged. I think Kanchan had mentioned it in one of the situations that arose in at IIJNM, was that nobody is obliged to tell you their story. Nobody is obliged to, talk to you about it. And even so, for survivors, they are, even more for survivors, they are not obliged to share their story. They're sharing it, of course, because they want it out. But it takes a lot of guts, a lot of courage to speak about the incident that they just want. I mean, different for different people, but they just want to, move ahead with. So that is why the sensitivity and the objectivity out of it is very important. That you can see that incident in a very objective way, and that will come with a lot of research, with a lot of reading, and a lot of practicing distancing yourself from the trauma, and practicing a lot of respect for the survivors. So these are the two things that really help when you want to speak to a survivor. um, the other aspect of it is that uh, at least for me, these kind of stories require way more patience than any story that is just fact based, because these stories are a little complex. Do not pressure them to share more than they want to. Avoid questions like why. Why were you at that place at that point? uh, while it might come across as a question that you just want to, put it into a story because you want to know, why, what was the mindset of the person while they were there. But when you're talking to a survivor, it can also seem like blaming, which is an emotion that they really, really do not want to be subjected to at that point. So it is very important to, framing your questions way in advance. And it is very important to look at these questions from the format of how the survivor will also take it. These are some basic courtesies that, sometimes we just slip when we are doing journalism, but it's just so much more important. As much as the industry or the system or the deadlines would want to make you slip these kind of details, it is equally that important to hold on to these details so that you can be associated with journalism or what you want to do in a long run. It's just not like 2-3 years that you want to do journalism or whatever. Like, you might be thinking of journalism as a very big career. So these are the kind of things that you would want to hold on to. Prepping your question in advance is done. Questions need to be very sensitive in nature, as much as sensitive that they can be. And by sensitive, I do not mean sympathy. I mean sensitive in terms of their language. And let's open the chat for that in terms of. I can give you a question, and you can tell me that how you know uh, how can it be more sensitive in nature. So I'm talking to a survivor, and I'm asking. I'm just going ahead and asking that what is the kind of support you have? I just want to know about, what is the kind of support that the survivor has right now for my story. This is a very curious question that, I would want to know that this is a very personal, curious question as well. That, I would want to know that, what is the kind of support that the survivor is getting. Um, I want to know, does this question sound sensitive to you? And yeah, let's just start with that. Does this question sound sensitive to you? Yes, no can be the options. Okay. And why would that be, Kaustav? And whoever is typing no, why is it not sensitive?
Because it's a very general question, that are you getting any support or not. So I don't think there is any need of emotional involvement.
Okay. Because it's direct and generic. All right.
Can I add something to that?
Please do.
It shows the dependency of the survivor, maybe. So, to project the subject as a powerful entity, we should avoid this kind of question.
Definitely. That is definitely one of the ways. That is one of the reasons. Thank you for sharing that. But I still want to know, as a journalist, maybe it is valuable for my story to know that, I just want to put the point across that the survivor is not alone, and the survivor is not alone, and she has a lot of, constructive support, not just like emotional support, constructive support in terms of lawyers, in terms of advocacy firms. I just want to put that idea in my story. Again, that can be a very empowering thing to do as well, that the survivor has people, and the perpetrator cannot get away with doing what he did. So that is the message that it sends out. So what would you think would be a better way to ask this question?
If I may speak, I might ask the survivor that who all were beside him or her during the time of crisis, because
Okay.
it's very important for the survivor to have supporters, because if he or she had not have any supporters, they would not have they might not have come out.
That's true. um, that has a lot of value, and I can sense the intention behind it as well. But maybe we can avoid using the words crisis, that helped him or her come out of the crisis. Who are the people beside them? I would also like to, acknowledge Shubhashree's question. A better way was asking could be, what motivated them to come out so strong. So these are two very, empowering words used in this format: motivates and strong. And that is the kind of narrative we want to build around the survivor as well. We can ask her about the support she got from the police, the medical staff, and the people around her. We could. This would be, I think this can also this seems to be on the lines of what I had also put in, which a lot of people found it, I think, insensitive, and rightly so, was, what is the support? One of the other ways to talk, to put across this point would be not to ask the survivor about this at all, but find, dig deeper into the story and talk to the advocacy firms around, who are involved in the case. Talk to the police about it. Uh, Directly talk to the police instead of asking the survivor what the police did. Uh, just ask the police that what they did. So I think there are values. There are two values in this kind of an approach. One is in some ways you're holding the police also accountable. That, you know, a journalist is looking forward for the police support, and if the police is not supporting, they might also look into it. So that is the kind of ripple effect you will be creating when you're asking this question, not to the survivor but to the police or the supporters who are supposed to be around the survivor, even the family. You can speak to the family and talk about how they plan to support the survivor, and you might get uh, perspective from them around you know, how they're doing it, and it might raise a question within themselves as well, that, you know, yeah, we are supposed to support the survivor, and this is how we would want to do it. Subhashri is saying that, or else we can build it as a generic human tendency to help each other. So the question will not be that heavy on the survivor. Okay. Yeah, definitely. The idea of the story can be around building a human tendency to help each other as well. Definitely. And it is very important not to put a lot of heaviness burden on the survivor, and just to create a tone where the survivor uh, is just like, at least while talking to you, there is no aspect of uh, shame or victim blaming, even indirectly or subconsciously. So it's very important for these kind of questions to be very sensitive. I cannot emphasize it more enough. Another Okay, we can move on from this point unless someone has anything to speak about it. Okay, we're good to go. Mindfulness of yeah, it is very important to have the mindfulness of not using the triggering images or the anecdotes with the survivors. uh, it's very important to not to ensure that while talking to you, the survivor minimize the replaying of the incident in survivor's head while speaking to you. Those are the kind of questions that need to be formed. So the questions around describe the area, exactly where it happened, and everything of that sort. Because I think those are the kind of answers you can also get it from the people who the other stakeholders in the story, which can be the police, or which could be an advocacy firm working with them. So the triggering images and the anecdotes are something that you wouldn't want to take up with the survivors. That's very important. And when you're talking about talking to any kind of survivor, while we do not take a lot of entitlement when we are speaking to the sources, that is anyway a very good practice. But while talking to survivors, it is a very good idea to leave the entitlement behind the door, outside the door. Sorry. Instead of asking, I would like to talk about it. Ask questions like, is it a good time to talk? Because they will be deciding when they want to speak and when they can talk about it. Moving on from the survivor, there is a lot of value in speaking to an expert or an advocate about the story. And that was one of the learnings of the stories that I also shared, because when I took it to the editor, I just took two factual stories about a woman and a trans person talking about, this is what has happened, and so it was just facts. But what gave it more weightage and more perspective was the uh, third source that we speak to in any story, which is the expert. And in a survivor, in a gender-based story, it is just so much more important to speak to an expert, because they can give you the data around it. They can give you the perspective, the larger picture of what the story is about. While the story is just about the woman at that point, uh, we also want to tap into that and move on to a place where we can talk about it on a bigger level, so that the impact of the story is more. And that is something that you will only get once you speak to an advocate who has been working in the field for a lot of years, or an expert who has a lot of information to share and a data to share about it. These stories, while gender-based stories are mostly facts, if you would have just noticed, talking about, this happened, that happened, and that's it. It is like a 2-column story on a page 2, like a crime story. But there is so much more that a gender-based story can create the impact if we just also look at the data. While it is very important for any kind of story to be data backed up, these kind of stories need it even more. Just to show that, this can do two things again. One is that it can give a larger perspective to the story, that these many women have faced this in so and so year. So it gives a picture that this is not an isolated case. This is a recurring problem, and as a society and as somebody who's a reader, uh, there is some responsibility to fix it. The second value to this kind of data-driven stories and gender-based coverage is that it does not put the survivor on the spot. It really does not, put the survivor on the spot. It makes it system versus survivors rather than perpetrator versus just one survivor. And I think that is why you would really would want to use the data. Bias has a question, and is it not the emotions of the survivors that matter, how the person uses? It's definitely very important. It's very important to put the emotional aspect of the story, emotional bandwidth of the story. I'm just saying that while that occupies a chunk of the story, it is very important to at least in the beginning or in the end, to move a little bit away, take the spotlight away from just the survivor and talk about it as a larger issue. Talk about it as this issue that is just not about that one person, and bringing in the emotionality, bringing in the personal details that the survivor, again, the onus or the choice is totally on the survivor to share all that, is something that that will give a lot of weightage to the story. And that is why that is when open to building a relationship with the survivor comes into the factor. Because the more comfortable relationship that you have with the survivor, the more emotional, the relevant information in terms of the emotional aspect of the story you will be able to get. I don't think if there is any other way that is sensitive, but to just try to build a relationship with the survivor. I hope that answers your question, Vyas. If not, I can take it again. Okay. I think we have already taken avoiding the question. Speaking to gender advocates about the overall situation is something that is very important. So this was about talking to the survivors. And before I move ahead to another very small section, are there any questions? Yeah. What should be done if someone accidentally asks a question that might be offensive, triggering for the survivor? How does the interview cover the damage? I was going to come to it towards the end of the workshop, but I can take it up now. The thing is that you are going to make mistakes as a journalist, and it can be there are two ways about it. There are two ways to go about it. Either you can be hard on yourself as a journalist, that why I did this and why it happened, or you can just find the ways to become a better journalist out of it. because I also want to reiterate the fact that that the victim and the survivor thing obviously, tried to hit on my guilt conscious as well. But at the end of the day, you just want to become, if you want to become a better journalist, you will just end up reading more about it. So it is okay in some cases to ask a triggering question, especially during the uh, first few years of your career. And that is why these kind of workshops or these kind of readings are important, because you already know. Because once you make a mistake and then try to rectify it, it becomes little difficult. But then also it is okay to make mistakes, as long as you work on them and as long as you want to cover the damage. And to answer this question directly, I don't think there's one way to go about it. Be an apology to the survivor, or maybe a sincere apology to the survivor, that I'm sorry, I did not mean to ask it that way. Or maybe that can be a process of relationship building as well. I mean, apologies make bonds stronger in a lot of cases. So that is something that can be looked into. I mean, it's very subjective, and I'm sure if you want to find a way, you will find a way. But being hard on yourself in that situation is just not going to help. So that's something that I can share. Is that okay, or you want me to dig more deep into that? Okay, Aditya. If there is a story which you publish, and later, as the case moves on, you realize that some of the data you published was false claim by the survivor, how you move ahead with the future article, knowing that incident actually happened, but a part of it was falsely claimed? Okay. So that is again a very complex situation that you might face in not just in gender stories, but any of the stories that involve a direct source. And that is why the journalistic ethic of confirming a fact through at least three sources comes in place. And so you will just not be talking to the survivor. I am not saying that you have to go all lawyer on it and just find the truth again it on it right then and there. But I think that is where journalists follow a very simple rule of talking to three people about a certain fact that can be molded here and there. So I think that is something also that comes with the process. And definitely just do not speak to the survivor about it, speak to other sources as well. So I think that is the precaution that you can take to avoid these kind of situations. And that's just me talking about it. This is a very good question, and I think it will come up with other stories as well. And IIJNM is basically, IIJNM is a place. What I could see was a buffer between just being a graduate to become a journalist. There was from day one we were not treated as students. We were treated as trainee journalists. So and when you're a trainee journalist, it is okay to make these kind of mistakes, and as long as you want to find a way out of it. So these are the questions that you can very very openly ask at a place like IIJNM, because these are exactly the kind of questions, these are, I think, exactly the kind of questions the professors would want to associate and want to help you out with, because these are the questions that will just make you a better journalist, moving ahead of these kind of questions. And as in them, I think it's just a place for that. Okay. Ananya is asking, what do you keep in mind when we get a chance to talk about the perpetrator? What to keep in mind when we get a chance to talk about the perpetrator? Okay. So when we are talking about the perpetrator, to the survivor, is it, Ananya? Are you talking about the survivor?
No, I'm talking about the perpetrator. If we get to chance to talk to them, what shall we keep in mind? Like how to ask them what are the ethics, and maybe that's what I meant.
Yeah. So in most cases, so the thing is that I haven't in my career spoken to a perpetrator. So I will not take the liberty to answer that question. But what comes to my mind is um just talk about facts. Be very very facts oriented when you're speaking to the perpetrator. Uh, Maybe a straight face, or just asking the kind of questions to bring out the mentality. The maybe the intention can be around bringing out the mentality of the perpetrator, should be the intentions, and a straight face and fact based questions can really help. And maybe the documentary that came out on for the journalist who had interviewed one of the uh, Nirbhaya convicts. Maybe that would be a very good example to look into if you want to, explore that. Yeah, 5 more minutes left. I have got a message from Nandini. Aditya has a question on, now that you have published the article and then you realize or come across the reality, so will you clear your say from the previous article or you move forward? So Aditya, I'm going to take this question in a very generic format, that if a newspaper in any kind of scenario has given wrong facts as a reporter, uh, they issue an apology. That is a section that is in the that is already placed in the format of a newspaper. However, in a gender-based story, it is a little bit unlikely that someone would want to share a wrong information. But I totally get your question in terms of what if it is false information. If it is false information, I don't think there are two ways about it. You just issue an apology that this is not what we were thinking. Um, but that is at least from what I have come across, that wouldn't be a situation that will arise a lot in a gender story, when you're dealing with survivors. So you don't have to worry about that, but just keep in mind that when you're talking to a survivor, you're also having some common questions when you're talking to the police or the family members or someone else around the story. Yeah, so that is really important. um does that answer your question, Aditya? Okay. Okay. Asking a woman when she's starting to compassion. Yeah. Okay. Uh, just before closing, I want to shift this conversation from talking about to the survivors to just creating a very, how you will also have a role to play in creating a gender sensitive newsroom as well. While I understand that the first priorities when you're getting out of IIJNM will just be to get a job and just explore your writing skills or as a journalist. But as and when you grow, you will find that you also play a role in building a safe environment in the newsroom as well. A few aspects to note in that are: try to be conscious about how much coverage that newspaper is giving to women related issues, gender related issues, uh, because there is a known fact that there is a disparity between the coverage itself around gender related stories and uh, you know uh, stories that are just not gender based. So that is one aspect that you would so when you get at a stage where you can choose the organization, maybe these are the good things that you would want to look into. An organization that gives enough weightage and coverage to women related stories. In a newsroom, it is very important to be vocal. It is very important to create you know it is a very good practice to try to create a non-gossip environment around uh, a woman journalist in a newsroom, as because you will be playing the role of a journalist in a various news organizations, uh, talking about, I mean, it would be a good idea to just talk about your fellow women colleagues in a, in a brighter light, than, you know uh, you know, add to the culture of gossip, because these are the kind of things that still happen in a newsroom. And to create a healthy newsroom, it is also very important to be open to holding your seniors accountable as well. If there is something that you feel is unhealthy, or something that is you want to raise your voice uh, about your safety in the organization or something of that sort, try to find ways. There will be ways to support you, and these are the kind of things that you do not have to take. Your newsroom is supposed to be an empowering, safe space for you, because you are out there creating those kind of stories. So it is very, very healthy to expect that kind of atmosphere from any kind of newsroom. And that can happen with the process of, calling out the wrong things. It's going to be little difficult. It can be little difficult, but it is normalizing holding seniors and colleagues accountable for, their unintended or intended sexist behaviors should be very much normalized. And just to have an idea, the conscious concept in your head can go a long way, because whenever you get a chance to do it, you will be able to do it. Yeah, that was about the newsroom. And in conclusion, I just want to say that gender reporting is one of the most sensitive things in journalism. And you also want your sources to remember you as a journalist and not just as a person utilizing them for their story. And it's a good feeling by the end of it when that happens. And it is okay to make mistakes, and it is okay to make mistakes in that process, as long as you want to, rectify them. And most importantly, you need to be sensitive with yourself as well, because these kind of stories, as I've already mentioned, are a little triggering, and they will require a lot of self-care, and there a lot of points where you just want to take care of yourself first and then take care of the story. And that's absolutely okay. That's absolutely okay for a journalist to do. And but the first few years are the most encouraging and most a lot of energy with the young journalists and all. So the first few years, just utilize them to the fullest extent, and I think you will be able to take it forward well.
All right. I think, okay, I've just posted the feedback link in the chat box, and I request everyone to provide your feedback to us. Thank you for sharing your perspective on how a gender-based story is to be reported. And I also thank you on the point that you highlighted about gender sensitivity. And thanks for reminding the journalist on the importance of carrying a sense of responsibility while reporting facts on gender-based stories. I also thank you, Punita, for sharing your personal experiences with us today in this webinar. And please fill the feedback form. And I think this brings us to an end. Before we go, in the next webinar, it's scheduled on 14th of July. We will be meeting Shraddha Chaudhary, copy chief at Hello Magazine, who will talk to us about media and journalism beyond the news desk. I hope to see you all in the next webinar. Have a great day. Bye, Punita. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.